I wasn't ready for that.
I wasn't planning to tell you about a concert. Why don't you turn yourself on? Did it go off again?
Green, okay. Don't touch. Willamette Valley Symphony, if you happen to enjoy classical music, we're going to have a fantastic concert at the beginning of February with Anthea Creston and Jason Duckles, who are local superstars playing violin and cello, the incredible Brahms violin and cello quartet. So if you like classical music, come. That's all I'll say about that. Because you're here to hear about Mulch. Pardon me?
Where will it be?
Oh, yeah, on Sunday, February 8th, I believe it is, 7th and 8th, at 4 p.m. at Ashbrook School, and also on Saturday at 7 p.m. in Albany at the North Albany High School. They have a fantastic auditorium there. Just go to Willamette Valley Symphony online to get tickets, or you can get them at the door. So, okay, she's counting. She's not waving at me. Anyway, you're here to learn about mulch, which is a great thing because it's really easy to overlook that. We think about the soil, we think about the plants when we're gardening. And I forgot my thing for changing slides. Just a second. Here we go. So let me start on that. I have a fairly brief time here, so I'm going to move through the material very, very quickly. I'll ask you to hold questions to the end because many of them will be answered, I guarantee you, in the talk. But I'm glad to hang around afterwards to answer questions, even out in the lobby or whatever. I don't have to go anywhere. So here we go. Maybe. All right, tech person. Tech person. Nothing's working. It's not working. I was all ready to go too, darn it. Yeah, we never did actually test if that worked. Or maybe we did, I don't remember. Dead battery?
Yeah.
Can I just press the button so I can get going?
You can.
Let's see, yeah,
Please, go
just
for it.
this one? No, that one. No.
Because we're in the Zoom
What
meeting,
do
so
I
no.
press? Dang.
There we go.
There we go.
That arrow.
Wait, what did you press?
I pressed arrow.
Arrow, okay. Well, if you get that working, please bring it to me. Otherwise, so you can read this, but I'll read it too in case your eyesight doesn't go that far like mine. What is mulch? One definition is it's any material that is spread over the soil surface and influences soil characteristics and sometimes plant growth. Okay, then I'll say go because that didn't work. Sorry for the technical problems. Okay. And usually that influence that it has is a positive influence, but it can be negative, and we'll talk about that a little bit too. Go. Okay, that's good. Okay, so this is divided basically into two parts. What mulch is and how to use it, and then kind of a catalog of all the many different kinds of mulch materials there are, which you might not, some of them you might not have even heard of. So let's move on. What can you use mulch for? I'm going to ask this in reverse. Is there anyone here who has not used mulch in their garden? Raise your hand. Hey, not a single one. Okay, that doesn't surprise me. So I'm sure everyone has used it for weed control or smothering weeds. Water conservation, it improves soil quality, or at least it can. It's definitely good for plant health. It can control temperature. It can protect the soil from a lot of different things, and it can often look really good. Go ahead. So any of those reasons, or all of those reasons, can be good reasons for using mulch. For weed control, coarse mulches work best, not really fine mulches. And things like woody mulches that are low in nitrogen are good because if you use high nitrogen mulches and or very fine mulches, the weed seeds will just sprout on the top of the mulch and think it's like soil, and so they'll love it. But coarse mulches will tend to discourage seeds that are in the soil from sprouting and aren't so great for blown-in seeds to sprout either. However, if you like to have a cottage garden where things self-sow by themselves all over the place, then it will discourage them too. So you have to make room for those. And of course, any kind of mulch makes it easier if you do get a weed established to pull it if it's only rooted in the mulch, that it's not rooted very deeply. By the way, for those folks in the back, there are several chairs up here in the front if you want to sit closer by any chance. Nice to see so many familiar faces out there. Go ahead. Oh, yeah. Can you go back for just a second? I forgot that. Okay, never mind. Well, what that statement, oh, there it is. Okay. Oh, it works now. Thank you. What was the problem?
It wasn't on.
It wasn't on. Thank you. That figures. Something didn't get turned on. Anyway, you'll often find a lot of weeds at the edge of any mulch, particularly if it's coming up on a concrete area. That's always something to watch for because the mulch is thin and so the seeds get in there. Okay, let's see if it does work. There we go. Yay! Okay. So mulch is great. One of the best reasons to use mulch, especially in our summer dry climate, is to keep the water in the soil. If you just leave bare soil, that's what it's going to look like in the summer. It'll crack. It'll break the roots of your plants. You won't be able to rehydrate it. It's just miserable. So, and if you happen to live, I'm sure none of you probably do, but like in eastern Oregon where it's more arid and there tends to be more salts in the soil, bare, dry soil gets these salt crusts too that are also really pretty horrendous. And by holding moisture in the soil, it reduces the amount of irrigation you need to apply during the summer. And in the winter, this is an important aspect too, it reduces damage from runoff, where you may get a lot of erosion from water running across your property. If it's well mulched, it'll reduce that a great deal. However, again, the very fine mulches, another warning against really fine mulches like bark dust, they can repel water. I've personally had the experience where I live now that there had been years and years of bark mulch applied and fine bark mulch before we moved in. And that was so hydrophobic, several inches deep, that after a long, wet winter, the soil was still bone dry underneath it, bone dry. So don't use those really fine bark mulches. They are not good for the soil. Okay. It builds soil structure. That's through the decomposition of whatever material you're using, adding organic matter to the soil. It's a slow process, but it moves down from the top of the soil gradually and will improve it. If you always keep your soil mulched, it will improve it slowly from the top. This is where I wish I had a pointer, but you can see some of the results of erosion from uncovered soil on the left there, whereas this is a soil profile cutting down through the soil. And you see up there at the top, dark, rich, beautiful organic soil. That's from all the organic matter in it, going down into the more bleached out subsoils that don't have the organic matter or the nutrients. Let's see. And all of that put together, all those things that mulches do for the soil, make your plants more healthy. I'm sure you've probably heard the term feed the soil more than the plants. If you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthier plants. If you have unhealthy soil, it doesn't much matter what you plant in it or what you put on it. They're not going to be as healthy if the soil is struggling. Mulches are often kind of treated as a fertilizer, and they do provide nutrients, obviously, because they're plant material that's breaking down, and those nutrients are going to be re-released into the soil solution for the plants. However, it's very slow. Let's put it that way. It's one of those long-term amendments that will provide nutrients very slowly. So, like if you're giving your vegetables a boost or something, it's not going to give them an instant boost in the spring. No. Minimizing nutrient loss, too. I almost forgot about that. Organic matter in the soil and on the soil is one of the things that keeps nutrients in the soil because they bind to the organic matter. Clay and organic matter are the things that hold nutrients the best, so they don't go running off with excess water or volatilizing into the air. They stay there and become available to the plants over time. This is just a nice little chart that scientifically shows how mulching helps with plant growth. This study was done in Michigan, but basically the thing to take from it is that the bar on the left in each case is with no mulch, and the bar on the right in each case is with mulch. It varied from plant to plant, but every single one of them had considerably more growth with mulch. They were happier, healthier plants. This is a big one in the summer. Well, winter too, actually, but summer tends to be the worst. It's like keeping a blanket on your soil. A nice mulch keeps the soil temperature more even. It doesn't have big ups and big downs. This is just a sunny day on bare soil. The air temperature is 92, the soil temperature is 95, and that's several inches below the surface because there's nothing protecting it. Now a little more about this. Oh, that was my joke. Some people think the bare soil look is hot, very hot. Well, it is very hot. I'm bad with jokes. I should just skip them. Anyway, this was a not scientific study that I did a few years ago, so it doesn't follow along with this narrative 100%, but basically this was on a sunny 92-degree day in summer. I took this soil thermometer and tested several different places in my yard. Well, the bare soil was 95 degrees. Composted manure over the soil, it was 82 degrees underneath the surface down in the soil, a lot cooler. Straw, only 80 degrees. Now the wood chips, 92, which was kind of surprising, and I think that was because it was just a very thin layer. If you had a thicker layer of wood chips, it would have kept the soil a lot cooler. And here's the real bad one, gravel, 96 degrees. It actually makes it hotter. So that's something we'll talk more about later. And this one is showing the other aspect of temperature regulation, the variation between night and daytime, which can fluctuate drastically. So that is bare soil. There's a 30-degree difference. This was over 24 hours in July, so this is a summertime variation. A 30-degree difference in the soil, not the air, on bare soil. The one covered by leaf debris, basically fallen leaves, hardly any variation at all, 5 degrees. It kept it very, very stable, which is nice for the plants. Wood chips, a decent layer, obviously, did the same thing, very, very little variation. Let's see, can I go back? Yes. The biggest variation was concrete, but concrete isn't mulch, so we're not talking about concrete. Another aspect of using mulch is for protection. Around trees used like this, especially newly planted trees, which this one isn't obviously, it keeps the grass from competing with those trees and keeps weeds from growing up around them. And for a newly planted tree in a lawn, people often think, oh, its roots are going to be deep and the lawn roots shallow and the tree won't care. Well, the feeder roots of the tree are basically the same place as the lawn is. Trees don't do really deep feeder roots for the most part. Those are support roots that go wide and deep. So keeping lawn away from a young tree in particular is really, really important to keep a good big mulch circle around it. And helps insulate them from drought stress and temperature variations, from cold damage in the winter, which letting the soil freeze around a young plant when we do get a cold winter, which we're not this year, can be very, very damaging to them. It hasn't had time to really get its roots down into the soil. And one thing that we think about when it rains here all the time too, when rain hits mud, it splatters all over walls, trees, whatever, and that can include disease spores splattering up on plants. So that's one more thing that mulch does, to help reduce that. Let's see. And of course, then, what a lot of people use mulch for primarily, especially the ubiquitous bark mulches, it tends to look nice. It gives a nice uniform surface around your plants. So put that all together, if you use the right mulch, which we'll be learning about shortly, it reduces your maintenance. It reduces the weeds you may have to pull. It reduces the amount of watering you have to do to keep the soil hydrated, and your plants will be healthier, so you don't have to coddle them, you don't have to replace them so much. So, let's see. Now, you may wonder, well, when should I put mulch on the soil? And there are multiple answers. In the fall and winter, you pretty much want to wait until most of the plants have died back, which granted is kind of tough this year because so many things have not died back or are only now dying back. But for the most part, that's a good rule of thumb anyway. In the winter, a good mulch reduces soil compaction from the rain. You'd be amazed how much compaction can be caused by thousands or millions of raindrops pounding on the soil all winter. It insulates the soil and the plant roots again. If you're in a place that gets cold enough to have frost heave, which is where the ground thaws and contracts, expands and contracts, and it can be very damaging to roots, it insulates the soil from that. And we get a lot of weeds that germinate in the winter too here, and it helps prevent those from doing that, which is always a nice thing. Now in the spring and summer, totally different thing. You want to try to apply it before the soil dries out for the summer, while you're still conserving that moisture that the winter put into the soil. And then it will help conserve water and keep the soil cooler all summer. Now, when not to mulch, if you have a vegetable garden and you want to start some really early vegetables, a mulch on the soil is going to keep the soil cooler. You want that soil to be warm for those early vegetables. So in that case, pull the mulch off and plant your vegetables. There are some times when you don't want to have a mulch on the soil. Whoops. Watch what I'm doing there. Now, I still haven't gone back far enough. Let's see what happened. Okay, when not to mulch. Yes. Other reasons for that. If you're the question of nutrients in the soil with mulch is a fairly complicated one, but your soil may already have an overabundance, especially if you've been adding lots of fertilizers for many years. It may have an overabundance of many nutrients. And we've had some studies showing that even just repeated applications of compost can give you excesses of potassium and phosphorus primarily, even to the point of being toxic. So if you've had a soil test that shows that kind of excess of nutrients, you may not want to plant or use the more nutritious mulches. You may want to stick with things like straw or wood chips that really don't add too much to the soil, don't increase that. And then just as an aside too, if you're interested at all in helping our native ground nesting bees and such, don't mulch everything. Leave some bare soil for them. Just leave it alone, some waste area that you don't need to be messing with, and let them nest there. Let's see. Okay. Now, depth of mulch is related to coarseness of mulch. If it's coarser, apply it deeper. If it's finer, apply it shallower. That's just the basic rule of thumb about that. Because a lot more air and water percolates through the coarser mulches and makes it, if it's too shallow, it won't do the various jobs of smothering things, smothering weeds and such, and keeping the soil insulated that you want it to do. People often ask if I put wood chips or anything like that on the soil, use those as a mulch, is it going to deplete nitrogen in the soil? On the surface of the soil, no, or virtually none, because that nitrogen depletion happens where the soil touches the mulch. That's where all the bacteria are active, and they're scarfing up the nitrogen that's there to decay the carbon in the woody mulches. If you mix it into the soil, then yes, it's absolutely going to deplete the nitrogen. So don't take woody mulches and mix them into the soil unless you add nitrogen too to make up for it, because that can actually harm your plants in the short term as those break down. Let's see. And another question people ask about is pH, like, do pine needles make my soil acidic if I use those as a mulch? Again, generally no, especially not in the long term, because once they break down, once something has been composted or decomposed, it has essentially no effect on the pH of the soil. It's actually very hard to change the pH of the soil, as anyone who's tried to do it seriously for their blueberries or something has discovered. It's not an easy thing to have happen. So again, generally not something you need to worry about. If you were trying to grow blueberries, which need very acid soil, in a very alkaline soil that was being made more alkaline by something near it, that's something you might have to deal with, but not usually a problem. And then one other question, or this isn't really a question, but mulches do help with carbon sequestration, which is something we tend to be thinking about with climate change and all now. The wood chips, if they're, well, size matters, again, as with so many things. Small wood chips, finely chopped mulches release carbon because they decay much faster, whereas bigger pieces don't. But you're not also going to mulch with logs or anything, really big pieces, which would be the slowest for that. But again, this is another one of the things that mulch does. The roots and the decayed matter in the soil store carbon. So if that's being preserved, if you have a highly organic soil being preserved by mulch, that's going to store more carbon. And more roots from plants will store more carbon too. Okay, and I'm not going fast enough here. We're going to run out. Don't do that. This is another one of those things people worry about because it's become kind of a meme almost. Oh my God, they're doing mulch volcanoes and it's going to rot the tree. Actually, it's not done very much. It's kind of hard to find a picture of one. But it is a good point that especially a fine mulch shouldn't be piled against a plant. It can hold moisture against a woody stem or something and not be very good for it. If it's very coarse, however, like a really coarse arborist wood chip mulch or something, it's really not going to have much effect on it because plenty of air gets through that. So, yeah, there are so many worries and myths out there. It's hard to know which ones to worry about. And just another plug for ground nesting bees. See that I don't have my pointer, but there's a cute little ground nesting bee there. Leave some room for them. Sunny location, well drained. It's okay to have some larger rocks on it or whatever. Just don't mulch it. Okay, one other type of mulch here that people don't generally think of as mulch is a living mulch, which is, of course, plants. If you leave the soil bare, it's going to get worse. It's not going to be good, healthy soil because the organic matter and the nutrients and everything gradually just burn off and disappear. If there's something growing in it, get used up, and they're not being replaced by organic matter. If you keep the soil well planted, then it's going to become healthier over time, retain its health and get healthier because the whole natural cycle of nutrients being taken out of and added back into the soil is in place there if you keep it covered with plants. So you can have temporary living mulches. We typically call that a cover crop and use it in a vegetable garden. Plant buckwheat or something in the summer. There's all sorts of different cover crops, which I won't get into, but they can provide a tremendous amount of biomass. You cut them down, they break down very quickly in the soil because they're high nitrogen and give your crops a really nice big boost of fast nutrients while also adding organic matter to the soil. So that's just, a temporary kind of living mulch. Permanent plantings, this is what nature does. You walk into any but the deepest, darkest, shadiest forest, and the understory is solid plants, from things that are, little mosses and things that are right down on the ground to the taller shrubs underneath the trees. Nature fills up every layer with plants, and that's a healthy ecosystem. So the more we can duplicate that with the plants that we plant, including the debris that forms the mulch in natural systems, whether we bring in wood chips or whether it's what falls naturally, all of that makes a healthier, more natural ecosystem. And then here's one that's you may not have heard of before. Another reason to keep the ground covered with something is the little pupae of all sorts of beneficial insects. They're feeding on the leaves and the trees and everything. And a lot of them fall to the ground to be in the ground on the winter or on the ground. And normally that would be in leaves or other debris. But if you've scraped it clear and it's just hard soil, or if it's concrete or something like that, those little pupae are just going to die or be eaten, more likely by a bird over the winter. So yet another reason to have some stuff on the ground, whatever that stuff is. And as far as, again, living mulches, it doesn't need to be anything exotic. It doesn't need to be fancy. We've got lamb's ears here, strawberries, and something that's related to kinnick but is a little bit larger. All of those are simple, common plants, but they still do that job of protecting the soil and give you, most of the benefits of any kind of living mulch. Even grass. We've tended to demonize lawns and grass, but grass is a living plant. It's better than bare soil. It's better than concrete. So, if you want some grass, have grass. Even when it's dormant in the summer, it's still leaving a cover on the ground and giving it some protection. These are examples of different types of plants that can be a kind of a uniform ground cover in different conditions. We've got one of our native plants, the Myanthemum or false Solomon seal, in the shade. Something short, I forget what that one is, for the sun, and they can be tall too. Ground covers don't have to be short. They can just anything that covers the ground. see. Okay. Oops. No, I don't want to skip that one. Come on. All right. We'll get there eventually. Okay. Wait a minute. I was pressing the right button. Okay, it just took a while to respond. I'll go slower. Okay, we did that. Come on, there. Technology. Anyway, slopes are perfect for a living mulch because if it's very sloped, rain will tend to wash off a lot of other mulches and wash them down to the bottom. So that's a great place to just plant something that can really hold that soil onto the slope. Okay, is it going to work? There we go. So basically, and lesson for that is that a very densely planted garden can be the best mulch. And since we like lots of plants, that's usually not too hard. You know, just plant all the different layers. That's one of the borders in my yard. And, you know, there's no room for weeds in there. And the soil's pretty healthy. Okay, now this second part is the materials section. And I'm already like 10 minutes over time. So I'm going to run through this really fast. Again, questions will definitely be answered at the end if you have some coming up. I'm going to get back over here so I can aim more easily. Ready, shoot, aim, whatever. Okay, so wood-based mulches, there's a whole bunch of those. Bark, wood chips, arborist chips, dyed wood, sawdust, cardboard, and newspaper are all based on wood. This is the format I'm going to follow for this guidebook here, sort of guide slide. For all of the wood-based mulches, these things are true. They slowly build organic matter. They minimize weeds if they're deep enough or thick enough, and they retain moisture. Negatively, they don't add much nutrition to the soil generally, and some of them have splinters if you're working with them. So I won't mention any of those again because they're true of all of the wood-based mulches. Now, bark mulch is the one everyone sees everywhere, whether it's dyed orange or all gray and bleached. It can be up from very, very large chunks to very fine, dusty or shredded materials. Typical uses are around trees, around borders, paths sometimes. You know, we pretty much see it everywhere, so it's not hard to find. Generally, in the Pacific Northwest, it's going to be fir or hemlock. Hemlock is supposed to be somewhat less splintery, if that's a concern. The pros unique to bark mulch are that it's very long, or pretty long lasting, and it gives a nice uniform appearance to a bed. Negatives are bark is hydrophobic. Did you know that? Mm-hmm. Bark is on the outside of trees and it repels water. So bark mulch is hydrophobic. And that's, you know, again, when you get to the really fine dusty ones, it's really hydrophobic because it's packed so tight. So that's a concern for that. Other than that, not any really big negatives. The best uses are for around trees and shrubs and you know, paths and things like that. Now, closely related is what's called playground wood chips. This is not arborist wood chips. We'll get to that. They are also a woody product, obviously. They're very uniform, often used on playgrounds, as you might guess, and pretty splitter-free. Because that's why they're called playground wood chips, so your kids aren't going to get splitters when they play with them. And those can be great in a lot of uses. That makes a very nice mulch in large containers, which mulching containers is a good idea too. Keeps the moisture in again. They are generally of one species at a time, and again, around here, it's typically going to be fir, hemlock, maybe a hardwood, and you can purchase them at places that sell the various types of landscaping supplies typically. They're like bark, moderately long-lasting, probably a little less long-lasting because they are not hydrophobic. They're wood, so they're going to decay faster. And they give a very nice uniform appearance while decaying faster, which can be a pro as well as a con, depending on your intentions. They are fairly expensive, however, being specially cut for playground use. Their best uses are on paths and play areas, and again, around trees and shrubs. Let's see. Get the button there. Now we get to arborist wood chips, which, is there anyone who hasn't heard of arborist wood chips yet? Yeah, a couple? Okay, good. A little news to anyone. Anyway, that's basically when someone comes and cuts down a tree or takes out some shrubs in your yard or whatever, throws it into their chipper, that's what it is. That's arborist wood chips. So it's going to be a mix of species. If it's in the growing season, it's going to be a mixture of woody and green materials, whatever they cut and chopped up. So the example up there in the corner is very fresh wood chips with a lot of greens mixed in, obviously some sort of conifer. On the left is what's one variety of it looks like after it's aged for a while. So it's a mix of sizes, but it all kind of ages to silvery after a while. Great for casual paths and things like that. There we go. It is a wonderful tool if you're trying to kill off a bunch of weeds and get some other things growing in there, particularly if you're going to go into shrubs or something like that. Put a deep layer on, like 8 inches or even deeper, and it'll smother all those weeds. Because it's coarse and irregular, it'll let rain and oxygen go through it to the soil. It won't be hydrophobic at all. It'll gradually break down and improve the soil, and it's frequently free too. So it's a good place for holding space, also when you don't want a bunch of weeds, but you're planning on planting something else there. Let me go back and just show you this, because this is that space in my yard with some plants in it and a whole bunch of wood chips. And this is what it looks like just a few years later. Things have really gotten very bountiful there. The pros generally, the green parts decay quickly, so you can get relatively quickly. You can get some pretty quick nutrition from it, whereas the woody parts stay for a good long time, as any other woody mulch does. It's moderately long lasting. Even if you buy it from a landscape supplier, it's pretty cheap, but often, if you keep your ears peeled, you can hear someone chopping things up in your neighborhood, and you run down the street and say, would you like to dump your wood chips in my driveway or whatever? And sometimes they say yes, and it's free. Or if you offer them a little bit of money, they'll be even more likely to do it. So it can be really convenient to get those, and you don't have to go get them yourself sometimes. Now, some people don't like the appearance. It can be highly variable. Again, green and woody, coarse and fine, different colors, and it's going to stay that way. It's going to stay irregular. So that's really the only negative I can think of about it. And it doesn't bother me, but for some people that might not be what they want in a given area. Best uses for this are around trees and shrubs, as with so many of these, casual paths, woodland paths, smothering weeds, and that long-term soil improvement. Dyed wood mulch. We don't see that much around here. Hey, it's wood. This actually, I just had to share it. I was in Chicago when I saw that up on the right. They matched it to the trash can. I couldn't believe it. But anyway, it's kind of fun. It could certainly be used artistically, but the wood it's made from can be construction leftovers, demolition sites and stuff. It can be contaminated with who knows what. So it's not generally a good choice, or it's not a safe choice for your yard, if you can even find it to buy it. It does have, on the pros part, it has uniform color, and you can definitely use it artistically, so, be fun for that. But you don't want creosote or whatever getting into your yard, so I really don't recommend using that one in general, but it could be fun. Sawdust is commonly recommended for using around blueberries because it's supposed to acidify the soil. I'm not sure how well it does that. Generally, from the research I've looked at indicates that that's actually a pretty minimal effect. You have to use stronger methods to really acidify the soil for your blueberries. But it's still a decent mulch, and something you can use on other things if you want to. As you would expect, if it's coarse, it's going to resist packing down. If it's very fine, it can form that sort of crust that'll repel water, so that's not such a great thing to put on the ground. It can be inexpensive or free if you have a woodworker in your family. You can get it for nothing. On the cons, again, if it's sawdust, it's too fine and it'll cake and pack. It's flammable. and particularly coarse ones like what's pictured there is very flammable, much more than most wood products. So that's something to be aware of. And again, if you're using finer like sawdust or something, we talked earlier about nitrogen depletion. A very fine, very carbonaceous mulch applied on the soil like that is going to deplete some carbon, so you'll want to add some nitrogen fertilizer with it too if you decide to use that. So given all of that, my opinion is the best use for that sort of thing is to compost it first. Just put it in your compost pile and let it mix up with all the other stuff, and then you don't have to deal with any of the negatives, and you can still get the benefits from it. But you can certainly, especially the coarser ones, use them as a mulch too if you have an abundance of something like that. Cardboard and newsprint, yes, they're wood products. So does anyone even still get newsprint anymore? I don't know. I'm hoarding. I have grocery bags of hoarded newspapers so that I still have some to use for mulch because you can hardly get the newspaper anymore. Anyway, those can be very good for smothering weeds. They are inexpensive or free typically, old boxes and newspapers, and are fine for temporary use in a garden. Negatively, cardboard in particular can, if you're using it as a smother mulch, which we'll talk a little more about in a minute if you don't know what that is, it can block the air and water exchange that is so important to the health of the soil. Left on for too long a time, that can be a problem. They can be very, very messy as a mulch unless you cover them with another mulch, like one of the ones we've talked about. And they really don't add any significant nutrition to the soil, being pretty much completely carbon. Now, this is about smother mulching. If you're not familiar with it, this is a commonly recommended method, which I use myself for killing a lawn or killing weeds. It's non-toxic because you're not spraying poison on the weeds or the lawn. It's slow because you need to leave it on for a good season or so, but it's very, very effective and definitely something that a lot of people like to use. You put down good thick layers of cardboard or mulch and then cover them over with something else to keep it in place and have it look better. And then after a season or two, your weeds are going to be dead, and you can go ahead and plant other things that you wanted to in there. Oh, and the newspaper in particular, but also the cardboard, they break down pretty quickly after a winter or so. They don't last that long on the soil, as long as they're allowed to get wet. Pros for this sort of mulching is that there are few chemicals. It's a no-till way of starting to prepare the soil. It's inexpensive or free, and it is effective. The negatives, again, I mentioned that it reduces air and water exchange. Sometimes you'll see people have put a bunch of cardboard down, and then they've made a few holes and planted their trees and shrubs through that and left the cardboard in place. That's problematic because just when the shrub or tree is trying to get started and needs water and needs nutrients, things are being blocked. Air and water is being blocked, and even nutrients. The soil isn't going to be operating quite normally. So that can be a problem. You could actually harm the plants that you're trying to protect with that sort of mulch around it. Again, this sort of material will blow away. It'll shift. It'll slide if you don't cover it with something else because they're in relatively small pieces. If you do let them dry out, especially the cardboard, it's very hydrophobic and very hard to get it wet again. Don't be in a hurry. This is a slow method. It's not like spraying a weed killer on something. Corrugated cardboard, some people are worried about termites. Yes, corrugated cardboard can provide a nice little place for termites to hide in it. Other than that, generally not an issue with this. And then something we don't generally think about, if you're killing lawn through this smother method, you're going to kill the lawn, but all that sod is still there. And you'd be amazed how long it can take a dense layer of lawn sod to break down. And it's hard to dig through. So just be aware of that if you're planning on killing a lawn. You may have a really hard time getting that soil loosened up and getting it all broken down so you actually can plant other things in that place. So enough on that one. For that same purpose, I already mentioned this, so I'll just mention it briefly again. Using arborist wood chips for the same smothering feature pretty much gets rid of all the problems of newsprint and cardboard and does a very good job of it. However, because you want to put it on pretty deep, if you're trying to do a really small area, you may have a hard time putting it on really deep because it's going to naturally be a lot thinner at the edges. So it's best for large areas, even where you can bring a truck in and just have them dump a huge load of it or something. Now, there's a number of other organic materials. Oh, I got to go faster. There's a list of them there. We're going to talk about them. These are the pros and cons, again, of all of them. True of all of these. They build organic matter. They minimize weeds if they're deep enough. They retain moisture. The negatives are highly variable because this is a wide variety of different things. Leaves. Nature's mulch. Keep them in your yard. Don't send them to the landfill. Do get them off your lawn. Rake them up, but move them over to under shrubs, side beds, wherever you can. Just don't leave them on lawn or really tiny things or your walkways because they're slippery. I dislocated my elbow last year from slipping on those darn leaves. Anyway, but don't send them to the landfill. They're very valuable. All right, there we go. They're, if you want to collect them yourself, if you don't have them in your yard, they're readily available all around the city at the time when they're doing leaf collection. Just go out with your trailer. I used to do this and just fill your trailer full of leaves or whatever. They make a great winter mulch. If they're fine leaves or if you shred them using your lawnmower or something, they decompose quite quickly too. Really big leaves can be a problem because those can layer and mat down and smother smaller things. So it's a good idea to run those through your lawnmower or something. In summary, they're free, they're abundant. Using them keeps them out of the landfill. They provide winter shelter for pollinators and insects, a really important consideration. They are messy. I mean, some people have a blower and they got to blow up every leaf, and okay, that's fine. They can shelter pests. They shelter insects that we like, but they also can shelter pests over the winter. And so if you have a really big problem with something that the leaves are sheltering, that you may have to take that into consideration. They can blow away or into your yard, either way, if it's windy and they're dry. Big ones can mat and smother plants. And some leaves, like, say, magnolia leaves that are really tough and high lignin, they can break down really, really slowly and really should be shredded or composted before you use them. So the best use for leaves, obviously, because of their timing, is as a winter mulch, because you get them in the fall. And chopping them up is a good idea, mostly. However, if you're going to chop them up, do that as early as you possibly can, because the little creatures that are going to spend the winter in those leaves, once they're in there, if you then go running over it with your lawnmower, you're going to kill a bunch of them too, little hibernating bees and things like that. So try and chop them up early. Okay, straw is another good mulch. Mostly used in vegetable gardens because it kind of looks messy, but it's a really excellent mulch. The main point about this is don't use hay, which is what they feed to animals, and it has seeds in it which will sprout in your garden. Use straw. Don't use grass straw because it's full of grass seeds which will sprout in your garden and be horrible weeds. So around here that leaves wheat or oat straw if you can find them. They're both excellent mulch. Their seeds will sprout, but you can recognize oats and wheats easily. You can let it grow if you want, or you can pull it out. They're very easy to pull out. So look for that, oat or wheat straw if you're going to use it. It's great for mulching vegetable gardens, temporary paths, anything like that, protecting little seedlings that you're planting in the spring, and it's not very expensive either. Easy to find around here from all sorts of sources. It does not compact. It's a very loose sort of mulch, so that's a good thing. Negatively, you may not like how it looks, so use it where you don't have to look at it too much. And we already talked about the seeds. And like leaves, it can blow around if it's windy enough. If you're in a very windy place, you might have to be careful where you use it. So it's good for a temporary mulch, seasonal mulches, and for erosion control. If you have a place that's muddy and is going to be eroded during the winter, throw down a whole bunch of straw. That'll do the job very nicely. And then compost, which it does get used as mulch sometimes. Obviously, excellent for building your soil and improving it. You can use it as a mulch, but boy, do weed seeds like to sprout in it. And not just ones that might blow in, unless you hot compost or have like compost out of a bag or something, it's probably got seeds in it. Not just from weeds, but maybe from your kale that went to seed or whatever. That's what I get all the time. So you need to be careful about using it as a mulch because probably some things are going to sprout in it. So keep an eye on it. If it's super well composted, like out of a bag, then you don't have to worry about that. But also don't expect much nutrition from it because by the time it's that well composted, the microbes have pretty much eaten up all the nitrogen and nutrients and they aren't terribly available. So it improves the soil physically as organic matter, but not so much providing nutrients. Pros and cons of that, if it's young enough that it has nutrients, they'll be slow release and it's easy to make at home and it's free if you make it from your own stuff. It's a good seed bed for weeds negatively. It does break down quite quickly because it's either composted or almost completely decayed, and so it's going to finish the job pretty quickly. And I already mentioned that if you use it year after year, you can end up with too much potassium and phosphorus in the soil. So getting a soil test now and then is always a good idea. The best use for compost, really, rather than as a mulch, is in planting holes, or if you're preparing a whole new bed, a large bed, mix plenty into that at that time. But mixing it into the soil rather than on the surface of the soil is the best place for it. It's kind of similar. A lot of people have access to stable bedding with animal manure in it, composted manure. Do not use fresh, only use composted. Preferably reasonably well composted. You need to use caution around vegetables too, because you don't want to use any sort of manure on vegetable or near vegetable parts that you're going to eat, so like root vegetables or anything, because you can definitely have some contaminants there. Again, a slow release sort of mulch there. If you use fresh manure, the excess of nutrients, high levels of some of the nutrients, especially salts, can actually burn plants, especially seedlings, so don't use it around seedlings. Salts and phosphorus do that. It can have herbicide residues depending on what the animals were fed. So, knowing where it came from could be a good idea. Some herbicides can go through an animal and still be there. Highly variable nutrient content. It may contain weed seeds, especially horse manure. They don't digest their seeds very well. So that's another good one to mix down into the soil, like compost, and or as a short-term surface mulch, like in a vegetable garden. Here's a really weird one, which you probably have never even seen, but I just thought I'd include it as wool is being promoted as a mulch. It's organic, in some places it's readily available. So I don't really know much about it. I've never tried it. It does repurpose a waste material. It could block slug and snails, which is one of the things that's said about it, but I don't know if you'd even see any around here. The main places I saw selling it were like in New Zealand or something. They have a lot of sheep in New Zealand, so I hear. Anyway, that's a weird one. Chopped up plants, when you're pruning your plants and chopping them up, that can be a perfectly good mulch. You can chop it up a lot with a chipper or a lawnmower or with your pruners, but that's, you don't have to compost it first. You can use it as a mulch. So some of the pluses of that sort of thing is it's high nitrogen if there's a lot of greens in it, like lawn. Using chopped lawn is a good mulch. So it adds relatively quick nutrition to your garden, which is very nice. It's free and readily available in your own yard. On the negatives, it does break down quickly, which is why it can provide pretty quick nutrition. So you would have to reapply it frequently. And of course, depending on what you're harvesting there, you may have seeds in it. And if you put on like something fine like lawn thickly, it can go anaerobic. That means the air is not getting into it and it gets all yucky and black, and you don't want that. So thin layers of things like that. So that's a perfectly good option. And one of the ways that you could do that, this is what I like to do, is called chop and drop. Why bother composting when you can stand there and chop the things up a bit and just drop them on the ground and have them be mulch? And particularly for dry things like a dead dry grass or something, It just saves a lot of hauling stuff back and forth. So that's a technique a lot of us like to use. Now, there's some local specialties, depending on what part of the country you live in. Here, we've got mint straw and we've got hazelnut shells. Most places don't have either of those. Those both make good mulches. Hazelnut shells are very long lasting. I don't think I've ever seen one decay. They're quite attractive. They do, if you wear cleated boots, they get in the cleats. So I don't like them in paths because of that. They are moderately expensive because you buy them in bags, but they're really not that expensive. They don't add nutrition or anything, but yeah, they're quite an attractive mulch. I like them in pots myself. They're good in pots. Then we have mint straw. That's only available at the tail end of summer when they've harvested and pressed the mint, and then the mint straw is available. Look for it on Craigslist. Inexpensive and is a perfectly nice mulch. I don't like to buy it in the spring after it's been sitting through a rainy winter, yeah, because it's partially decomposed at that point, and you end up with these big chunks which don't break apart very nicely. So I recommend getting it when it's fresh at the end of summer. It's a very nice vegetable garden mulch. This, I'm not even going to talk about it. It's just a mulch comparison chart, and I'm so far behind here because we were late starting. So now we have inorganic materials. Rocks and gravel, plastic, landscape and geotextile fabric, and rubber, and dust mulch. Again, the pros for all of these in this category are that they're very long lasting. They generally will minimize weeds, and they conserve moisture. Negatively, no improvement to the soil from inorganic mulches and no nutrients added to the soil. So they have a limited suite of activities there. Rocks and gravel are a very commonly used mulch. There's a problem with weeds in them. You know, here's someone who did some nice landscaping with rocks there. They put the mulch on, and it looks fine the first year. They neglected it for a while, and the weeds start sprouting. They neglected it for a year, and see, the weeds love to sprout in gravel. It's perfect for them. So you pretty much need a flamethrower or something to keep ending up. It's not zero maintenance. People think that if they put down gravel, it's going to be zero maintenance. No, it's just going to be a mess unless you take care of it. So herbicides are a flame weeder. That's about all you can do with that. It's wishful thinking to think that it's zero maintenance. But it can be a very good mulch, particularly in drier landscapes where a rocky surface is more the norm than it is here. Then you have far fewer weeds sprouting randomly in a drier landscape. Here, they sprout all year round, pretty much. There's a number of types of rocks that you can get. Lava rock, which is very coarse, and they haul it over from the east side. Quarter 10 minus, I should have put in there, washed crushed rock. I don't know that you can buy it right around here, but this is absolutely fantastic if you're trying to grow plants that need sharp winter drainage and your soil is not sharply drained, which is common here. You put on a few inches of that, and it keeps the tops of the plants well drained, and then you could grow all sorts of things. If you're familiar with Joy Creek Nursery, that's out of business now, they use this all over their wonderful gardens and group plants that just wouldn't grow here otherwise. So if you can find it, it's great stuff. River rock is a large, beautiful type of rock, not great for walking on, but it's very attractive. And all sorts of ornamental gravels can be gotten too. You can use rocks ornamentally in a lot of different areas, but if you let a bunch of leaves fall on them and kind of decompose, you're definitely going to need a blower to get those out because they get stuck in there. The pros in generally, it's attractive and fire retardant. If you're looking to do a fire-wise landscape, look at rock mulches because they're not going to burn. They can increase the soil temperature in summer rather than decrease it, and the weeds germinate. And also, once you've put a bunch of rocks on your soil, it's very hard to remove, which is why I'll go up to the top line there, using an underlayment. If you're going to use rock for a path, absolutely use landscape fabric or plastic as an underlayment. It'll reduce the number of weeds, but most importantly, it'll keep the gravel from going down into the soil, because between winter and walking on it, all those rocks are just going to go into the soil if you don't block them. So you need to use that. Now, in a landscape area, and we'll get to that in a bit, underlayments are a lot more problematic. And here we go with those, plastic sheeting. Good for temporary mulch only. And one thing I haven't tried is a red plastic mulch is supposed to be really good for growing tomatoes. I haven't tried it, but it is an interesting idea. If you put these things on your landscape permanently, they are not permanent. They end up getting exposed, blown around, torn. They can damage a tree from being too tight around it. So they just don't. Any of you who've moved into a house that someone had put plastic and landscape fabric everywhere around it, you had a nightmare to deal with trying to pull it out. Don't leave that for someone else. The pros of plastic sheeting in general, it's very easy to apply, and it warms the soil up in the spring. So it's great for starting your vegetable garden. You know, keep the soil warmer during the winter, then pull it off and plant your vegetables. It completely blocks the movement of air and water, interferes with soil microbial activity, everything. You know, nothing works underneath plastic. Nothing in the soil works. It's very unattractive unless it's well covered with other mulches, which don't stay in place. If you do cover it with other mulches, then weeds will grow in the mulch on top of it. And then when it starts to break down into little pieces, it's almost impossible to remove. So again, temporary use, warming the soil in the spring, but not a good thing to put in your garden on a permanent basis. Same for geotextile fabric. In addition to the problems of plastic, yes, this lets some air and moisture through. It also lets roots through. So the weeds that root on the top of it get their roots down into it, and then when you pull them, you pull up the geotextile fabric. I'm over time here. Can I keep going? I mean, it's past 1 if you have to leave. I can keep going? Okay. Sorry, we got off to a slow start here. So some of the good uses for it, for geotextile or plastic, but probably geotextile is generally better, is, again, under a path to keep whatever you're using for your path material from sinking. And, you know, various commercial uses where they really have to control weeds, but even there, it's a fairly temporary use. They're typically pulling those up fairly regularly. So just a summary of the pros and cons of that. I think we pretty much went over these. It does temporarily work as a weed block, but weeds will grow on top of it. It does allow some air and water exchange. It's really unattractive unless you cover it with something else. You still get weed problems with it. And it will the other thing, it'll clog up too. If you do leave it, it's going to clog up with soil or other mulches or whatever, and then it's not providing any air and water exchange. So let's see, rubber mulch, another one of those kind of odd things. I ran across these about a mile from my house. There's rubber tree circles, and one of them is not even a tree. So I guess it's to keep the weeds down right around it. Anyway, rubber is sold for playground use because it's resilient, so if the little kids fall off the playground things, they don't hurt themselves. But rubber is super flammable. So I don't know. I wouldn't use it under my kids' playground things if I had kids anymore. It does, as a pro maybe, it repurposes rubber tire waste, and it does let water through it, which is a good thing. The con is it's made of rubber tire waste, which is kind of chemical-y. So it's highly flammable. It can release toxic chemicals. It absorbs heat and can increase the soil temperature. And it can definitely damage plants and soil life. This is simply not recommended. If you see it, don't use it. Rubber mulch, no. Maybe the little tree circles, maybe, because those would be temporary, and you can pick them up and get rid of them anyway. Now, this is something you may not have heard of, dust mulching. This is used by people who are doing dry farming, which I will not get into because that's a rabbit hole. But basically, the idea is that you do not mulch the soil at all, and you keep a layer of dry, cultivated soil, like with a hoe, of a few inches deep on the top of the soil. And so moisture that's deep in the soil, which normally would gradually move up and evaporate, is stopped by the very, very loose dust layer on the top and stays down below where the roots can get it. That's the theory behind it. If you want to know more about it, look it up online, because I'm going to keep moving here. Now, there's obviously some problems with some mulches. I already mentioned that minced straw, after it's gone through a winter, can have some frisbee clumps. I mean, they're so big they don't break apart. Hard to deal with. Various mulches can harbor various types of pests. Deep mulches can provide winter cover to rodents, so particularly don't put a deep mulch around trees in the winter because voles and things will go under the mulch, come up and eat all the bark off your tree, and possibly kill it. So don't let them do that. I mentioned termites earlier. Generally, they're not attracted by wood mulches, but a mulch piled against the house to where it's close to your wooden siding, that can provide a pathway for termites to get up into your house, so that's something to watch out for. And then, I don't know, baby rabbit in the mulch, you decide whether it's a pest or not. Another possible negative, since we tend to run to very saturated winter soils here in the Willamette Valley, if you put a deep mulch on a saturated soil, it's going to stay colder and wetter, and that can certainly be a problem for the plants that might be trying to grow there. Another thing you might not think of is the soil is saturated, and you've got a coarse mulch on top of it that's relatively dry. The roots, if this goes on long enough, the roots will tend to grow up into that mulch. And then if you pull the mulch away or something, you can actually be damaging the roots of the plants that have grown up into it. Kind of an unusual situation, but it definitely could happen if you run to saturated soils in your yard. Just the mulch drying out in the summer can cause that to happen because the roots have gone up when it was wet and airy up there, and then it dries out and then they're kind of stuck. So. Now, we're getting to questions people ask again. So if these were in your mind, I'm going to answer them. Can a mulch from a diseased plant spread a disease? Generally, no. If you've composted, if it's a composted mulch, almost always not, because the disease organisms and all just break down in the composting process. But if you're using uncomposted materials from a diseased plant, you definitely should not put them around a similar plant. You know, for instance, oaks with sudden oak death, that could absolutely be spread to another oak by an uncomposted mulch. Various diseases of trees can be spread that way. If you have black spot on your roses, don't take those rose leaves and put them by another rose. You know, that's a great way of spreading black spot to your roses. You're generally cautioned not to compost diseased plant material, and that's fine. You know, if you don't want to compost it, don't compost it. If your composting is thorough and hot, you're not going to really have any problem with them. But most of us don't do a really hot compost, so it's something to be concerned about. You know, just be careful with it. Can you get human diseases from mulches? The only thing I'm aware of is that fungal spores, when you're running a compost pile or any other type of mulch that is in the process of composting, fungal spores can come up in the heat and the steam that may come off of it. And if those get in your lungs, especially if you already have compromised lungs, that can be really, really serious. So I do recommend wearing a mask, like I see a few of you people doing here, if you're turning compost or turning anything that might be steaming up in your face. Just on general principles, try not to breathe in fungal spores that could cause problems. And then there's fungi in mulches, which people often worry about because you see all sorts of interesting things growing out of woody mulches now and then. Mushrooms are common. Adorable little bird's nest fungi, which are like the size of my little tiny fingernail. They're really tiny and cute. Slime molds are the one we get lots of questions about. Overnight, something that looks vaguely like that will show up in your mulch, and you go, "What the hell? Did someone vomit here or what?" Well, if you don't like the slime molds, just get a rake. They dry quickly, and just rake them up. This is all natural stuff, nothing to worry about. They grow in those woody mulches in particular. And what am I waiting for here? Okay, I'm waiting for the end. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all for staying. As I said, I'm happy to hang around and answer questions. But if you need to go, feel free. So, okay, lady.
Question, can you speak about washed dairy manure?
Washed dairy manure. Okay, so she wants to know about washed dairy manure. To the best of my recollection, you're wanting dairy manure that's been sitting around for a while, is pretty well composted, and then has had, I don't exactly know what sort of washing process, but some sort of washing process that would tend to wash out excess salts and such that might be in the dairy manure. So if you can get it, and I know the dairy, the OSU dairy up on Harrison Boulevard, which I think you can still get manure from, though it's been a few years since I have. You used to be able to get washed dairy manure there, but I don't know for sure if that's still the case. You have to call them and ask, because, yeah, that's about all I know about that particular one, yeah. You can, he says you can still get it there. Okay, good.
It's not easy. They have a concrete
Yeah.
wall, and yeah.
You got to go with your own vehicle and make an appointment, and you know, then if they have a truck, they'll come and load it maybe, but yeah.
So you don't want to interfere.
Yeah, you definitely have to call them first. So if you want that call. Yes.
We ran out of the handouts.
Oh.
About a dozen people asking if they could get those somewhere.
Yeah, so she said you ran out of the handouts. That's such a good attendance here. Can Cheryl? Can we make the handout available to people through however they signed up for this?
One item each.
Hand me a piece of paper with your address. I will send you the handout. Somebody needs one right here.
Okay, another question. Yes, Ruby.
Magnolia leaves. You didn't mention any other leaves that we should be cautious of.
Well, yeah, so she's saying, I mentioned magnolia leaves as being a hard to decompose leaf because they're so tough. And yeah, she has a big magnolia. She knows about them. She complains every year about them. Anyway, oh boy, off the top of my head, I mean, holly leaves, you know, anything that's really waxy and tough is going to be slower to decompose than the softer leaves. And you can tell by looking at one whether it's that kind or not. I can't think off the top of my head of any others like that. Yes?
It seemed like one of your earlier slides said that don't use mulch in a vegetable garden.
Don't use which?
Don't use mulch in a vegetable garden.
Oh, no, you can use mulch in a vegetable garden. So, yeah, I must have not been clear about that. If you want the soil to warm up early in the spring, you'd want to, if you've put a winter mulch onto it, you'd want to pull it off so the sun can get to the actual soil to warm it up. But no, absolutely, it'll keep your weeds down in your vegetable garden. Just, you know, you have to think more about little seedlings, you know, because you're putting little seedlings in a vegetable garden or starting things from seed, so you don't want to put super deep mulches or anything. That's why straw is really good, because it's light and fluffy. You know, it's a good vegetable garden mulch. Oh, wait, actually, Ruby, you did one. Let me get her next.
Any advice about using organic fertilizers around woody mulches?
Organic fertilizers around woody mulches.
Well, I mean, you've got a different
Sure.
soil, and yet you've got a layer of mulch. What are you doing there?
Well, geez. I mean, if it's a high nitrogen, if it's a woody mulch and a high nitrogen organic fertilizer, that would tend to be a good thing, because if you put it on the mulch, because the nitrogen would help break down the carbon, help the bacteria and all break down the carbon faster. If you really want to get it to the roots of your plants, you might want to dig a few little holes in the mulch and put it down against the, you know, in the soil. That, you know, on the soil would, if it's on the soil, it'll get into the soil and where the roots are faster. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just doing the tedious thing of getting the mulch away to get the
Yeah.
fertilizer down in. And
Is it something that really needs fertilizer too? People tend to really over-fertilize. If it's an established woody plant, it probably doesn't need fertilizer. Any other? Oh, Ruby, you had another question. Yeah.
Point out that the city does use a high heat compost.
That's a really good point. She's saying that the city compost, it is high heat, hot compost. I believe they test it, so you can feel comfortable, as far as I know, getting compost that the city produces from what we put in our yard debris bins. I haven't used any for a while, but I've used it in the past and never had any complaints about it. Yeah.
PRC compost.
Yeah, PRC compost, Processing and Recovery Center.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's still open.
Yeah.
I do use the lamb's wool, the dirty lamb's wool I get from a friend who has a sheep farm.
I don't know about using wool as a mulch. That was just kind of an oddity. I have never tried it.
The only thing is that the little mice and vole do like it because they've got nice protection.
Ah, she says the mice and voles like it. Yeah, okay, I can believe that. So, yeah, as I say, I don't even know if you can get it around here. So it was just something someone mentioned, and I said, sure, I'll put it in the talk. So, anything else, or are we done here? Okay, well, thank you very much, and thanks for hanging around so long. See if I can get this. Thank you.
Say my hello. Wednesday because
I know.
it goes. Yes, they're 3.5 Cases are stacked. It has not.